Good morning. This is Denise Dryden, and I'm here live in Whitefish, Montana, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit today about narcissism. And it looks like my connection, of course, in Whitefish, no matter whether I'm with Wi-Fi or where I am, it goes in and out. So we're live, and I can't thank you enough for joining me. I hope you got your cup of tea or your coffee, and you brought your curiosity, and you have maybe some questions you'd like to ask. You can always type them in as you're watching, and I can answer them because I can see it on the screen over here on the side. So let's talk about narcissism. Narcissism is according to the DSM-5, is a personality disorder, and it ranks up there with, serious diagnoses that most academic, educational, psychological testing can't put on the actual testing until the age of 18, when they are an adult. So narcissism can show up before in our children, and it can show up as narcissistic traits, which means, hint, hint, we're starting to see a lot of lack of emotional strength, a lot of ability to show empathy with others. And when that little red flag shows up on one of our kiddos' testing, it's a real important thing to pay attention to. And it sort of triggered me this week because I was working with a family that had some specific little markers going on in their young 13-year-old. And so what that meant to me was that we really do need to talk about empathy within our culture and find out what that means. So narcissism. Narcissistic personality disorder is the complete lack of empathy for another human being. It is also the inability to access our own true self emotions and to sort of operate with whatever I see or feel that comes into me from the outside is how I process the world. And so there's this gap between the heart-centered feeling, that sort of deep, authentic love, self-love, authentic love, and the ability to see people on the outside, and then to be attached as an adult. Especially, I think the statistics are that 95% of narcissists are males. It's becoming more prevalent that women are now having this diagnosis. However, it has predominantly been males in our culture. So what we have with this diagnosis, or with this issue, is seeing people as outside of ourselves, seeing someone that we can identify with, that brings us pleasure, that brings us joy, as much as we can attach to what they're doing on the outside of us. So in some ways, it's the truest form of a disconnected heart. And when I say let's look at narcissism from a different perspective, it means that mirroring in childhood, the mirroring of sound, of hearing a mother's voice, of reassurance, of presence, eye contact, gaze, that unconditional love is being sent your way as an infant, and that this is what matters to me, that you are here and I'm holding you and I'm paying attention to you, and you can hear me and you can see me and you can touch me, and you know that I am going to provide safety for you, and I'm going to be your navigator in this earth. And so as a parent, as a mother, we are the first human being that teaches this child how to see the world, how to be the world. And what happens in the typical narcissist diagnosis is that somewhere between birth and 18 months, 2 years, that mirroring by the mother has been damaged. Whether she's busy, whether she's not self-aware, whether she's in some sort of addiction or pain, or whether she's in overwhelm, or whether she just simply doesn't have time or make time to connect. But that mirroring is absent in the traditional psychological studies. So when we have a human being who's raised without any sort of imprinting of this is how we allow the world to come in and work with that sensitive part of our heart, then we become very external. and we become very manipulative and controlling about how the external world comes in and how we perceive ourselves versus the external world. Now, one of the key parts that I always work with as a metaphysician is that sometimes we come into this lifetime with so many hurts, so many wounds, so many horrific experiences that we come in with a closed heart and we say, I'm willing to incarnate, I'm willing to be here, but I am not willing to participate and show this very vulnerable, special part of me. So that we can put, like as a maybe, it's over here, whether you believe that or not, or whether we see this imprinting and this mirroring that happens from the mother's perspective. The bottom line is that there's this disconnect in the adult on how they're supposed to participate in the arena of love and empathy and compassion and caring for others, because they're in survival mode themselves. And in that survival mode, they're fighting as hard as they can to find out whether they're even worthy of someone's attention, whether they are even necessary in this world. Now, when we talk about narcissism and the idea that we are throwing this around in our political arena and in our culture, and that we have a lot of male-dominated arenas, whether it's in acting, whether it's in politics, whether it's in sports, whether it's in businesses, of men who've done really, really well in their world, as long as it's external, but don't really allow things to get very close. What happens when we're looking at it from a parenting perspective? What happens when we have a parent who is either a full-blown narcissist, or we have a parent who is so damaged, so wounded, that they're unable to connect with us, and they move children around like pawns? They move children around, like when a child is playing soccer and the child's doing really well, it makes us feel good as an adult. When we have a child that everyone comes up and pats you on the back and says, your kiddo is so cool to have in class, it's like, I matter. I matter. Somehow I matter. And I've got an awesome, great friend of mine from Vermont who just signed in. So hello there. This is awesome to have you here, Kristen. So what happens when we have this attachment to our children, and our children are raised knowing that we either provide love or we provide something, we have to provide something to change the mood of mom or dad, especially dad. What I wanted to do was also tie in a little bit that if narcissism is a lack of empathy, and we as a culture are starting to see a lot more symptoms of the lack of empathy, it sort of shifts the responsibility back on us as parents to start looking at, what is our relationship with empathy? What do we know about ourselves, and how we can put ourselves in another person's shoes, put ourselves in another person's experience, how we can show love and compassion for someone when they are hurting, how we can navigate through the tough emotions and realize, what is it that stops me in my tracks? What is it that I can do for myself that gets me back on track, gets me back present, and gets me back into that unconditional love scenario? So when we are able to hold that as parents, then we model this to our kids, and we teach our children empathy. So what's happening, this is my opinion, and I've worked in testing and placement for adolescents and young adults for years now, is that when we see narcissistic traits, I always wonder, is that actually the beginning, the blooming of a full-blown narcissist, or is it a scenario where this kiddo hasn't had a lot of opportunities to demonstrate empathy, doesn't even know how it works, doesn't know how to create that? So as a mother and as a father, how do we model empathy? How do we start to talk all the time about what it's like to be involved in this world, to have love for other people? So I think it begins with emotional intelligence, being able to talk about our feelings, being able to talk about how we process our feelings. You know, not ad nauseum, like, oh my God, this is what happened to me today, but this is what I encountered. This is how I felt. This is what I needed to do inside to go take care of that. And this is where I'm at right now. Hey guys, how am I doing on that? You know, because sometimes our kids feel us. They feel our disassociation. They feel our pain much more than if we talk about it. So when we take the words and we match them with our heart and we pair them with the experiences and the impressions that our children have of us, then they can say that's authentic and that's real. When they see something and they hear words out here and those words don't match what they're feeling, they doubt themselves. And we create children that push away, that don't want to get involved in anything really close and intimate, and they don't know how to understand other people, because this disparity between actions and words out here and what they perceive, especially our children who are empathic and sensitive and they can sort of see what's going on in our moods already. It's like, and we think we're trying to hide it from them, right? So I had some notes, and I've been, of course, all over the internet last night and this morning, just double checking to see what's the best way to present this information to you this morning on Sunday from Montana. So, you know, a sense of awareness, being able to give our children an awareness that emotions are part of life, and the emotions can hurt and they can bring joy, and that we're along for the ride, but it comes from our heart. We don't process our emotions in our head. We don't talk about them as if they're disconnected. We feel them, and we teach feeling. We take in another person's perspective. In other words, like in one of the programs I work with, it's being able to walk in their moccasins, to say, I can actually feel what it's like to be you, and I know that this must be hard for you. So how can I be of service? How can I be of assistance? How can I be there to just let you know that you're not alone? So that kind of empathy match is crucial in modeling with our kids. The other thing is being able to regulate our own emotions, to be able to say, I was triggered, I'm in a really foul place. I'm going to take about 5 minutes and I'm going to go take a walk around the block. I'm going to do my own self-soothing, and I'm going to come back and say, I'm here, I did my work, and I hope that it's not spreading out into you. And then if you are hurt, and if we are triggered, and if we are angry, is to be able to say that that exists in us, what we think it's about, and what we're going to do about it. So that emotions and the ability to connect to our heart and empathy are part of our being at all times as parents, and we're modeling it. So what happens when we have a 15, 16-year-old kiddo who has no empathy, who has no ability to connect to the other world? And that's when we have to find out, what is it that they use for self-soothing? What is it that they use for distraction? What is it that they're so afraid of feeling? And how do we start to make that real, even though it might take some time? So as adults, what we do is we do our own work. We start to explore our own relationship with our emotions, our own outbursts, our own introverted withdrawals, our own, distraction with busyness. And we model how we bring that into authenticity for our children. And we show them over and over and over again what it looks like to be absolutely present in your body, absolutely emotionally lined up and true and honest. And then from that point, what we do is we allow our children to have their own experiences. Now, we have the helicopter moms who are like, oh, he has to do this, he has to do this, he has to do this, and he has to stay on his homework. And if we do that from a control status or standard, what we're doing is we're teaching them that outside of ourselves, somebody's always going to come along and self-correct. And then we have the snowplow parent, which I love this term, where they just drive ahead and they clear the way for anything that might be painful, that might be disruptive, that might be difficult for their child, so that their child doesn't have any opportunity to experience these things. I'm saying crash both of those and start showing your kiddo what real life looks like. what it feels like, what it takes to process it, and what it takes to really step through difficult things like deaths in the family or illness or a loss of a job or a change in relationship status or what happens when you lose a really good friend, and allow that hurt to be there, allow that process to be there, and allow that empathy to be present. Because what we want to do more than anything is we want to invite that very scared, isolated, wounded heart to want to come a little bit more present. And so it starts with us as the parents. So this is the kind of work that I do. I work with parents on disorders, on learning challenges. I think that we as parents, we have enough going on in our own life. There's me, there's my work, there's my body, there's my key relationship. And then when we add children, we have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 additional balls in the air of people that we have to model for and take care of. So that's what I coach, is as a parent, how do you do life when kids are watching you and they're mimicking you and they're learning from you, and it's your responsibility to steward them forward in a way that makes sense. So DeniseDrydenCoaching.com is my website. You can see all of these videos that I've been doing weekly. I think this is the 6th one. And my intention is to talk for 10-15 minutes every Sunday about something that comes up in my coaching, comes up in the world, comes up that's poignant to you. So I hope you join me on Sunday. Pass this along to your friends. Come see me on DeniseDrydenCoaching.com, and I'll look forward to seeing you next Sunday. Take care.